Hello, welcome to Economics 231, 232, Chapter 1 bonus quiz. This is extra credit, so it'll be counted as a full quiz. It will go on the top when I calculate all the points that you get correct, and it will be divided by the number of required quizzes and the points on them. So this is extra credit. Today we're going to talk about something very important, what it means to know something. As I talked about to students who've been in class, you spent 13 years of your life in government prison day camp. Government forced your parents to put you there. The question is why? Why was it so important that we had to force your parents, literally at gunpoint, with the threat of the government taking you away? Why do we have to send you to government prison day camp for 13 years of your life? Most people would say, oh, we were supposed to go there so that we could learn. Okay, that's fine. What does it mean to learn? To learn means to come to know things. That's great. We like to know things. What does it mean to know something? And it draws blank stares. The first job I ever had was as a fry cook at a Carl's Jr. It's like a Hardee's. The first day I had this job, I came in. They put me with some other kid. He said, all right, he's going to train you. Guy brought me over, said, this is a fry station. This is where you work. That's the fryer. Inside there is grease. That's hot. Don't touch it. Okay? Your job is to make tasty fries. When an order comes in, grab the order, take the fries, pull the basket out of the grease, dump the fries in there. If you dump the fries in to the grease, it'll splatter up and it'll burn you. Put the fries in the grease, push the timer. The timer tells you how long to cook the fries so they taste good. If the timer goes off, pull the fries out. Don't pull them out before the timer goes off. They won't be cooked enough. The customer won't like them. They'll bring them back. You have to cook them again. Cost the company money. Do it too long, the same thing will happen. When the timer goes off, take the fries, shake the grease off. If you don't shake the grease off, the fries won't taste good. Customer will bring them back. You have to make them again. Cost company money. Okay? Then dump them in this pan that drain more grease off of them and take the salt shaker. Put eight shakes on there. No more, no less. You do it more or less, they won't taste good. Customer will bring them back. But to do it again, cost company money. Then put them in the bag, put them under the heat lamp so they stay warm. If they're cold, customer won't like them. And tell the people up front they're done. The first day on the worst job I ever had in my life, I knew everything I was supposed to be doing, why I was there, what I was supposed to do, how to do it. Why didn't they ever tell you in government prison day camp what it meant to know something? They told you all kinds of other things. Why did they never tell you what you were supposed to be doing there and how to do it? So today, we're working on that. This is important. Okay, we've talked about reasons why. But when it comes to economics, what you think economics is, how economics should be done, is based on what you think about knowledge. So in order to know something, it must be true. That's the first thing. What does it mean for something to be true? My in-class students, I assign them to go out and look on the internet for what it means for something to be true. And they all say the same thing. It's hard to find a definition. It's hard to find someone who will tell you what it means for something to be true. And that is because people don't agree on it. Okay? Some people will tell you, oh, something is true if what is in your mind corresponds to reality. Okay? Corresponds. Ladies, imagine you're out on a date or something with your boyfriend, your husband, significant other, whatever, and you look over at that person and you say, am I pretty? And that person looks back at you and says, well, you correspond to pretty. Are they having a good night? No. Guys, you're dating some young woman, whatever. You say, hey, are we monogamous? Do we have an exclusive relationship? And she looks at you and says, well, What we have corresponds to an exclusive relationship. That means she's cheating on you. Okay? Now, other versions of what it means for something to be true. If we look to St. Thomas, Aquinas, Aristotle, and others, we get a completely different definition. Father John J. Toohey, a book on epistemology, it was actually notes taken by students in his class. He said that we use this word true in three different senses. The first thing we have is what we call an ontological truth. Ontology is the study of what exists and what doesn't. Okay. Toohey says when we use this word true or truth in the form of an ontological truth, we are talking about something that exists independent of the mind's knowing it. So an ontological truth is something that exists independent of our minds knowing it. These are the things that we want to come to know. I used to like the History Channel. If you ever watch it, there's no history on it anymore. It's like counting cars now and Pawn Stars and hunting Bigfoot, searching for Bigfoot. Okay? There is no Bigfoot, just let everybody know. Okay. I don't think so. Now, what are they trying to do on that show? It is an ontological truth that there either is or is not a Bigfoot roaming through the forests of North America. They're trying to discover this ontological truth and maybe find a Bigfoot. Okay, good luck. That's an ontological truth. There either is or there is not a Bigfoot running through the forest of North America. The second way we use this word, and this is the one we're more focused on right now, Toohey says, is in the form of a logical truth. A logical truth exists when what is in our minds is identical with reality. So what's in my mind is the same thing that's in reality. To give you an example of this, we look at objects like the sun, the moon, whatever. And we notice certain commonalities between the sun, the moon, and other things that are like it. We notice there's no corners, there's no straight lines, it's round all the way through. It has each point on the outside is roughly the same distance from some center point. It's symmetrical. We notice these commonalities or these characteristics of certain things. Our logic is our mind's ability to compare and contrast things. Are they alike or different? Are they the same or not the same? Are they similar or dissimilar? We notice these similarities amongst the sun, the moon, and other things like it, like this speaker here on my headphone. And we look at them and we give that characteristic a name, circleness. Okay? Aristotle, Aquinas, and Toohey believe that the mind is an element of reality. It's just as real as you or I or the sun or the moon or the planets or the stars or rocks or planets or things and animals. Thus, it's capable of being brought into relationships with them. One example of a relationship is two things are the same. That doesn't mean I have, hot gases in my head or moon rocks in my head or plastic like the speaker. What it means is that what's in my mind that I call circleness is the same thing that's in those objects that make them circles. So I can say, I know the shape of this headphone is a circle. And it's right, it's true. I can know things about reality. The Platonists, on the other hand, would say, well, you have this form of a circle in your mind that exists, it's burned in there. You had it when you were born. and you're imposing that onto reality, where it might not otherwise be. So a logical truth, and what we're using here, is that what's in our mind is identical with what is in reality. Okay? The third type of a truth is what's called a moral truth, and that is when we say what we assent to or believe, or what's in our mind. So if I said that this was a square, I don't believe it's a square. I don't assent to that. This to me is a circle. Okay? Now, you could be telling a moral truth. Let's say I had never looked at these earphones, or last time I had earphones on, they were square. So I thought these were square. Then I could say, oh, the headphones are square. That would be a moral truth because that's what I assent to. But it wouldn't be a logical truth, and that's what we're concerned with here, because what I assent to is not identical with reality. They're actually a circle. So that's what it means for something to be true. You have to assent to it. I couldn't say that I know something I don't believe. I couldn't say I know there's a Bigfoot because I don't believe that there is a Bigfoot running through the forest of North America. You have to assent to it. Now, those first 2 points aren't overly controversial. The third point is you have to assent for a good reason. What is a good reason? That's what we're here to examine. To derive this or to understand this, we have to delve into something called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. It comes from the Greek. The things that we come to know are called propositions, such as the sun is the earphone is a circle. I'm a man. The little picture here thing I have is a rectangle. Those are examples of propositions. Those are the things that we come to know. Propositions get categorized in a twofold manner. They get two names, a first name and a last name, just like a person, no middle names. The first name can either be analytic or synthetic. The last name can either be a priori or a posteriori. A posteriori. Those are the only two choices. That gives us four types of propositions. These are the things that the human mind could possibly know or potentially know. Now, people disagree on these. Some people say we can only know one thing, and that's the analytic a priori. These are arbitrary terms, definitions, and equations, things that you can come to understand or know if they're true or false through logic alone. You don't need observation. Most philosophers say these things are non-operational. They don't tell us anything real or interesting about the real world. Some people think you could know two things. They're Platonists. They think you could know these analytic a priori propositions and a second type called synthetic a posteriori. These are things in which logic is necessary but not sufficient in order to determine if it's true or false, and you need observation. So you need logic and observation. That's things we call sense data. You're looking at this square or this rectangle here, okay? That's sense data, and you match that up sort of with this form or definition of a rectangle you have in your head, and you impose rectangle onto this block here, this shape. You say, oh, that's a rectangle. It corresponds to a rectangle, okay? These are the same types of people who, when we talk about science, would say that science is the use and application of the scientific method. That science, and they'll also say science is scientific propositions must be falsifiable. Scientific propositions must be verifiable in fact. Okay, science is prediction, like Milton Friedman did earlier. Those people are all Platonists. They believe you can come to know two types of things. There's some people who believe you can come to know three types of things. The analytic a priori, arbitrary terms, definitions, and equations. Synthetic a posteriori, sense data from observation. And the third type of thing is the synthetic a priori. These are what are called axioms. We'll see later. Okay? These are things you can learn through logic. Logic's necessary but not sufficient in order to determine if they're true. And you don't need observation. I don't need to see, smell, hear, taste, touch, or get unreliable authority from someone who did. Instead, I get these things through introspection, taking a concept in my head, flipping it over, seeing if I could possibly show that it can't be true without contradicting myself, engaging in what we call a contradiction or a performative contradiction. It's very strong proof. It's where you have to use something in order to prove its own to prove its own lack of existence. That would be like saying, here, I'm going to use police brutality to convince you there is no police brutality. Okay, sounds Kafkaesque, right? That would be an example of a third type of knowledge, these synthetic a priori propositions. St. Thomas, Aristotle, Kant, Father Tui would accept this third type of knowledge, that we can come to know it. No one says you can know four things. Now, the first name that a proposition gets refers to the relationship between that proposition and logic. Okay? Analytic propositions are those in which the means of formal logic are sufficient in order to determine if they're true or false. So logic and logic alone, the mind's ability to compare and contrast things, can tell you if these are true or false. Synthetic propositions are those in which the means of formal logic are necessary. I've got to have logic, but not sufficient in order to determine if it's true or false. I've got to have logic, but I need something else. Okay? Unbeknownst to most Alabama football fans, showing up to the game is not enough to ensure an Alabama victory, although most Alabama fans think so. In order to win a football game, you have to show up. You can't show up if you can't win if you don't show up. It's necessary. But you also have to score more points than the other team at the end of the game to win. So you need to show up, but you also need to score more points. A synthetic proposition, you've got to have logic, but that's not enough. You also need something else to know if it's true or false. The second name, or the last name that a proposition gets, is a priori or a posteriori. A priori propositions are those in which observation is not necessary in order to determine if they're true or false. You don't have to observe them. When philosophers say observe things, they mean see, smell, hear, taste, touch, or get unreliable authority from someone who did. Okay? Who lost at the Battle of Waterloo? The answer is Napoleon and the French. None of us were alive when Napoleon lost that battle, but we get from reliable authority, people who did see it, who had no incentive or ability to lie to us, that Napoleon lost and then went into exile. A posteriori propositions are those in which observation is necessary to determine if they are true or false. You do need to observe it. Someone had to see the Battle of Waterloo and see Napoleon get exiled to know that that happened. And we get unreliable authority from those people who did. Now, these terms get put together in Kant's box. So this analytic, that row, everything that row has the first name analytic. Synthetic, everything in that row has the word synthetic as its first name. The columns, everything in this column is a priori. Everything in this column is a posteriori. Now, if I were taking notes, I would write the four different propositions that we're going to go over. I'd write the name down. The first one, this first box here, is analytic a priori. I'd write those down. I'd write down everything that goes in that box and everything I say about the box, because I don't have a way of writing on this. Okay? This whole box here, the big box, contains everything that a human being, a human mind could possibly know. Every potential piece of knowledge goes in that box. Now, remember, in order to know something, it has to be true. You have to assent to it, to give yourself to it, and you have to assent for a good reason. These boxes are going to tell us what is a good reason for knowing each type of proposition. There's different reasons. There are good reasons for knowing these things. So all human knowledge goes in that box. This first box here is in the analytic row and the a priori column, analytic column, a priori row. So this box is the analytic a priori proposition. These are propositions, by being analytic, in which the means of formal logic are sufficient in order to determine if they're true or false. So I need logic and logic alone. A priori means observations not required. That makes sense. If all I need is logic, I don't need something else, in this case observation, to know if it's true or false. Inside of this box, we put definitions, terms, and equations. I don't have equations written in the box. I didn't have room for it. So make sure you write equations in your notes. These types of propositions, philosophers say some very, very mean things about them. They call them arbitrary, tautologies. The tautology is something that's just true by definition. A rose is a multi-petaled flower that smells nice and has thorns. That would be a tautology. I've defined the term rose as a multi-flowered flowered petal with thorns and smells nice. Okay, it's true by definition. The final thing they say about these is that they are non-operational. And that's a big deal. Non-operational means that these things in this box, these analytic a priori terms, definitions, terms, and equations, do not tell us anything new or interesting about the real world. Okay? The next box is the analytic a posteriori box. These are propositions in which the means of formal logic are sufficient, that's all you need, in order to determine if they're true or false, and require observation. That doesn't make sense. If logic is enough, then I don't need observation. How could I need observation? Most philosophers agree that that's a contradiction, and nothing goes in this box. There are no analytic a posteriori propositions. The only thing I've ever heard that could go in there would be if you were to count to a new highest prime number. Good luck on that. Nothing goes in that box. The third box we have, I'm going to start from this bottom one, is the synthetic a posteriori box. These are propositions in which the means of formal logic are necessary but not sufficient in order to determine if they're true or false. That's what synthetic means. You've got to have logic, but it's not enough. You need something else. A posteriori propositions are those in which observation is necessary in order to determine if they are true or false. So that makes sense. I need logic, but it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's not enough. I also need observation. That makes sense. The things that go in that box are called sense data. Okay? So if you go outside and it's hot, that's sense data. If you take a thermometer outside and watch the mercury go up to 95 degrees and say it's 95 degrees outside, as long as your thermometer is accurate, that's sense data. Okay. Philosophers point out that sense data, these things, their truth value, is dependent on time and space, time and place. So these things can be true at one place at one time, but not be true in another place or at another time. The example is today, it might be 95 degrees out. Does that mean tomorrow it's going to 95? No. Is it 95 in South America? No, because it's winter down there. Only here and only now do I know it's 95 degrees because I just went out and looked at the thermometer. Okay. I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt. That's true today. That's true here. Is it true on the moon? No, I am not wearing a white and blue shirt on the striped shirt on the moon. I'm not wearing a blue and white striped shirt in Alaska or at Tala or Washington, D.C. or China. Here and now I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt. Have I always worn a blue and white striped shirt? No, I was born without one. Will I always wear a blue and white striped shirt? No. Tomorrow, I'm going to wear a green one. So only here and only now is it true I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt. These things are true only at certain times and only in certain places. The final box is the controversial one. This final box, the synthetic a priori proposition, synthetic a priori proposition. These are things in which the means of formal logic are necessary, but not sufficient in order to determine if they are true or false. I need logic, but logic alone, I can't use logic alone to determine if it's true or false. I need something else. Here, that something else was observation. It was a posteriori. Here, a priori propositions, that means observation is not necessary in order to determine if that proposition is true or false. So that makes a head scratcher here. I need logic. It's necessary, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient. I need something else. A priori says that something else, I don't need observation. So what is it? Immanuel Kant, who came up with this box, it's called Kant's box. There's this picture there. He said that we came to know these things through introspection, by examining a proposition in our minds and seeing if it could possibly not be true. If it were possible it could not be true, it's not, it doesn't go in this box. But if it can't possibly be untrue, then it goes in that box. And philosophers say very nice things about axioms. They also call them universals. A universal is something that is true now, then, and always. It's true throughout time. And it's true in all places. It's true here, there, and everywhere. Those would be nice things to know. Now, Kant thought that you came to know these through what he called introspection. You sit in a closed, quiet room and think about a proposition and think about whether or not it could be false. If you can't disprove this thing without contradicting yourself, basically using the thing to prove its own, that it doesn't exist, then we have an axiom. An example of an axiom might be the human action axiom. All men must act. In acting, they use scarce resources, including time and one's own physical body, through a perceived causality, a cause and effect relationship, to accomplish given ends. Now, what that says is that we have goals. Human beings have goals. These goals, ends, needs, wants, it's all the same thing, arise from imperfections in reality. These imperfections in reality cause an uneasiness within us. If you were in Alaska right now in shorts and a t-shirt, the weather wouldn't be perfect. It would cause an uneasiness within us. We call that feeling cold or freezing. Okay? We form human goals to relieve this uneasiness. So your goal might be to warm the air up around your body if you were in Alaska in a shirt and tank top and shorts. You would then look around you for scarce resources, things that are under your control, and look to see if you knew of a causality, a cause and effect relationship between one or some of those things and warming the air up around your body. So maybe you look and you have a pen, a piece of paper, and a parka, and a ski suit. Do I know of a cause and effect relationship between this pen and warming the air up around my body? No. This piece of paper? No. But I do know of a cause and effect relationship between a parka and a ski suit and warming the air up around my body. I perceive that if I put those things on, that will warm the air up around my body and bring it closer to a perfect temperature. So I then act on that, and I put the parka and the coat on. Now, it only has to be a perceived cause and effect relationship. Okay? I could be wrong, but if I perceive of one, I'm going to act. Mises says we're in a constant state of purposeful action. It is impossible for a human being to not act. Think about that, and you will come to the conclusion that he's right. If I wanted to demonstrate or argue that I could not act, to prove it to you, anything I did would be an action. I would be using scarce resources, including time in my own physical body, through a perceived cause and effect relationship to accomplish my goal of proving to you that I cannot act. Even if I just laid down, closed my eyes, and didn't move, I'm still using time in my physical body to try and prove to you I cannot act. So Mises would say this is universally true. Wherever there are humans, they're acting. Now, many philosophers say that nothing goes in this box. It gets an X too. They would say there are no such things as universals. Is that true? If it were true, and you knew this, it would have to go inside of this box. Where would it go? Would it go in here? In the analytic a priori, definitions, terms, and equations? No, because those things are non-operational. They're tautologies. They're arbitrary. You say tomato, I say tomato. You say I act, I say you don't. Would it go in this box? Nothing goes in that box. Would it go in this box? If it went in that box, I would have to observe every single potential proposition knowable to man's mind, examine each and every one of them, and prove They are not axioms. Could I, would I, should I do that? No. And even if I did, it would only be true at a certain time in a certain place. There could be other propositions that come along later or have come along in the past or are present in other places that I haven't examined. If that statement were true, that there are no universals or there are no axioms, it would have to be an axiom or universal truth. It would have to go in this box. But I just said there's nothing in that box. Can there be nothing and something in that box at the same time? The answer is no. The law of contradiction says you can't have something and nothing in that box. You're lying. So Kant and Mises and other people would say that there are axioms and we can and do in fact know some. The people who deny these things don't think it through very well. Remember geometry? Just thinking off the top of your head, two parallel lines passing through two separate points on the same plane never what? Never cross, intersect, touch. Forever. They never touch. We know this not because we've examined every set of parallel planes, every set of parallel lines on a flat plane passing through two separate points. We know this, and we call it an axiom in geometry. We use it and other axioms to derive things like the Pythagorean theorem, right? We use these to talk about the interior angles of a triangle, that they must sum up to 180 degrees if the triangle's on a flat plane. What if I told you I had a job? I go around the world examining triangles to make sure the interior angles add up to 180. You'd say, who pays you to do that? Can I get one? But you'd say, your job is worthless. They're all going to add up. You could not do your job and still do your job at the same time. Every triangle we ever measured would add up to 180. We know that already. Okay. Physical sciences, all of the instruments that we use to gain our sense data are built based, almost all of them are built based on axiom-based sciences that we already know everything about. We don't even teach anymore. They've just merely become technical knowledge for scientific instrument makers, things like hydrometry, etc. The instruments that we use in scientific observations have to be built on universal principles so that we know that observations we get from them are true. Otherwise, they would be built on hypothetical principles, and the observations we get from them would be hypothetical, not true. Okay. Now, why would you deny them? Well, if you deny these two boxes, you're in Plato's camp. You could think of these as the forms. These are these definitions, terms, equations, these forms we have in our minds. And then we're imposing them onto sense data that we observe. These are the people who would say that science is the use and application of the scientific method. The scientific propositions must be falsifiable. They must be verifiable in fact, that science is prediction. Okay, the filing cabinet theory of science, that we take these observations, put them into little files. I've got this file, this form called woman, and I go out and I look at women and I say, well, you correspond to a woman. I put you in the woman file. I take men, you correspond to a man. I put you in the man file. And I'm imposing maleness and femaleness on to real objects where it might not otherwise be. I could be imposing order onto a disordered reality. In my mind, this leads to nihilism. A nihilist says you can only know things in this box. These two boxes we don't know anything about. We can't know that. Okay? Those are the ones that say, oh man, we don't know anything about reality, dude, right? That wall isn't there. It's just a figment of your imagination, right? These are things you might talk about if you're hanging out with your buddies drinking too much or smoking things you shouldn't be smoking. But everyone knows this desk is here, that wall is there, right? Even the professors that profess these things, they know, they'll sit there in the class and say that wall is just a figment of your imagination. And then if you watch them, after every class, they do the same thing. They don't walk through the wall. They don't even try. They walk through the doorway because they know the wall is there. They're lying. Now, what you think about this box determines what you think science is and how it should be done. Those people who think that we know two things, I'm going to start at the bottom here, they go into the positivist box. Positivism denies the existence of axioms, relies on those arbitrary, non-operational, analytic a priori propositions. That becomes our theory. Oftentimes, in economics, we'll use a mathematical theory. We'll define terms and set up an equation, then use mathematical logic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, calculus, algebra, geometry, etc., to come up with a testable hypothesis, then go out and collect numerical data, perform an experiment, and match the results of the experiment with our hypothesis. If the data matches our hypothesis, then we fail to reject it. We never accept a theory using the scientific method. If you ever hear someone say, oh, my data matched my hypothesis, therefore we accept my theory, they're lying. All the scientific method does is say, well, at this point in time, we have no evidence to suggest that your theory's false. But the next experiment could contradict your theory, and then it's false. Then we reject the theory, throw it away, derive a new one, and try and test it. We continually do this over and over and over, never proving the theory that we're testing. There are three reasons for this. One, there could be a missing variable problem. There could be variables that are controlling the results of our experiment that we don't know about and haven't controlled for them in the experiment. So there could be some weird form of radiation that's heating up the dish that we put over the fire, and we don't know about it. And if it's not there, a fire won't heat the dish. Okay? A lot of people say, oh, heck with that. That's garbage. Fire heats the dish. Does it every time. Okay? The second reason is what we call the Duhem-Queiny theorem. Duhem-Queiny theorem. D-U-H-E-M apostrophe or dash Q-U-I-N-N-E theorem. Here, Duhem-Queiny theorem basically states that there are an infinite number of collections of arbitrary terms, definitions, and equations, analytic a priori propositions, that we could use to produce a hypothesis to match any given data set. So if we did an experiment a thousand, a million, a billion times over and over, and every time it matched your hypothesis, we still could not say that your theory was true. Because there are another infinite number of other theories using arbitrary terms, definitions, and equations that we could use that would produce a hypothesis to match that same data set, those millions of experiments. we would have no way of knowing which one of them, if any of them, are true. You'd say, mine matched the data a billion times. So did mine. So did his. So did hers. So did theirs. So did that one. And we'd have no idea of knowing which one, if any of them, was actually true. The third problem is the nature of the data itself. If we only have analytic a priori propositions, arbitrary terms, definitions, and equations, the first box, and synthetic a posteriori data, the bottom right-hand box, sense data, the best thing we could say about the information from our experiment is that some of it was true at certain times and in certain places. But we can't say that those things are true everywhere and always, now and forever, then and always, here and everywhere. Only at certain times and in certain places did we get those experiments that produced that result. We could do one in another place at another time, and we don't know if we'll get the same results. Now, there's one way we could know, we could do quantity theorem, going back to that. There's one way we could know if we had the right theory. And that would be if all of the things in our theory were universally true. They were true here, there, and everywhere, now, then, and always. If we had a theory based solely in axioms or things that we knew to be true, everywhere and always, now, then, and everywhere, that would be an axiom. But the positivists deny the existence of axioms. They say that there are no axioms, even though for that to be true, it would have to be an axiom itself. The praxeological method in economics is based on axioms, or what Rothbard would call non-controversial empirical truths, things such as that labor implies disutility, okay? All units of a homogeneous good provide less utility than previous units, things like that, things you can't deny being true axioms. Great Guido Hulsmann shows that a lot of these, what Rothbard calls empirical, non-controversial empirical truths are actually axioms. Okay, we don't need to get into that. Right? Here, if the premises of our theory are axioms, that means they're all true. We use logic to come to conclusions. That's our theory. If our premises are true, our logic is correct, then there's nothing in our conclusions that wasn't already contained in our true premises. So the conclusion has to be true as well. This praxeological method says my premises are true, my logic is correct. If that's so, there's nothing in my conclusion that wasn't already contained in my true premises, so my conclusion is true as well, and we don't need to test it. We don't need to perform experiments. Instead of spending my time testing theory over and over and over again to see if it could be false, instead of doing that, I have true theory that I can use to go out and explain the real world and apply it to reality. And that's the praxeological method. If we go back here, the positivists only accept these two boxes. They say there's nothing in here. We put another X in it. There's your theory. There's the results of your experiments. We compare them to the hypothesis we got from our theory and reject or fail to reject it. That's it. The Praxeological people say, no, there's this third type of knowledge, these axioms, and if we can come to know enough of them, we can derive true theory from it. They oftentimes are what we would call methodological dualists. They say there are some sciences where we know all the axioms, hydrometry, teleometry, optics maybe, geometry, praxeology, the study of human action, where because we're human, we can know what it means to be human, and we can actually derive a true science from fundamental a priori propositions, these axioms. And it's true. We can use that to explain social interactions involving scarce means that have alternative uses that are used to accomplish given ends and involve catalactics or economic calculation. That's economics. So, if you were to pick a method, and I do this in every class, which one do you think is the best for economics? I want you to pick one. Give you a second to do that. Do you like the praxeological method? Do you believe in axioms? Do you believe that we can use deductive logic to come to conclusions that are true and do not require testing? Or do you deny the existence of axioms? Believe we use arbitrary terms, definitions, and equations, these analytic a priori propositions, to form theory, and then have to constantly retest and test it over and over again, never proving if it's true? Go ahead and pick one. When I do this in class, almost no one picks this positivist method. Almost everyone picks the praxeological method. If they do, I say, well, do you deny the existence of axioms? I guess I do. Well, if that were true, is it a arbitrary term, definition, or equation? You say tomato, I say tomato. You say there's no axioms, I say it. They say, no, it's not that. Is it a analytic a posteriori proposition? No, we agreed. There's nothing in that box. Did you get this from observation? Do you examine every proposition, find out if any of them are possibly axioms, and show that they all aren't? No, I can't and didn't do that. I'd be dumb. Well, if it's true, which box would it have to go in? They say, oh, if I were to say that there are no axioms, I guess that has to be an axiom. Oh, crap. You would be very surprised to know that the majority of my profession falls in this positivist camp. They deny the existence of axioms. With all the problems that come with it, I guess you're denying the validity of almost every single scientific observation we make as being true, and say, nope, they're only hypothetical, right? Deny the proofs of algebra, of geometry. Do you deny that you act? Yeah, I deny all that. With all the problems that come with it. Why would you do that? Well, just like before, we talked about science. St. Thomas, Aristotle, Father Tui, these guys all agree on what science is. Any one of their followers. Science is the discovery of things, their natures, and the relationships between things. Almost everyone. Plato, and these guys are in the Platonist camp, the positivists, they have all these different definitions for science, and they don't agree on what it is. In essence, they don't believe in the truth. They mostly think we're just imparting forms or order onto a formless or disordered reality, or at least we certainly don't know if those forms are right or not. That what's in our mind is what's in reality. They just say, well, we're imposing these things onto it. But the other thing is, these people in the praxeological school, they almost all to a T agree that government interventions in the economy don't produce the desired results. My science is called the dismal science. If you go back before the 1930s, most of my profession was in this camp. And they pretty much came to the same conclusions. Okay? Robbing Peter to pay Paul doesn't make the world a better place. That governments, by taxing one group of individuals and giving that money for something or for nothing from other individuals, doesn't make the world a better place. You make some people better off, but you make other people worse off. Okay? They constantly told the state no. When the government came up with a plan to solve a problem like poverty, I know what we'll do. We'll take money from non-poor people and we'll give it to poor people. That'll make them non-poor. Economists said, no, it won't work. Instead, eventually you'll make everyone poor. Okay? By taking money from non-poor people, they produce things, they buy things. You give it to poor people, those things are gone. That makes non-poor people poor. They have less money, less things that they can buy. Some of them become poor, so you're going to take more money, so forth and so on. And eventually we'll all be poor. Many people, this is shown today by Western welfare states. Okay? What I just said sounds like welfare, right? Instead of creating fewer poor people, it creates more poor people. The means, taking money from non-poor people and giving it to poor people, doesn't accomplish your goal of ending poverty. It in fact creates more of it. Paying people to be poor creates more poor people and fewer workers. So we constantly told the state no, so we were called the dismal science. When you relieve yourself of these axioms and you can pick the premises of your theories and call them arbitrary, you can derive theories that show that government interventions can make the world a better place. We just assume things in a certain way. The premises you pick determine what your outcome of your theory is, or your logic process. So if we pick certain things to be our premises, we can develop theories that say, yes, robbing Peter to pay Paul can make the world a better place. If enlightened rulers do it, or if good rulers do it, there's no such thing as a good politician. I haven't met one. But they say we can make the world a better place by taking money out of one pocket and putting it into another pocket. Okay. These positivists generally can come up with theories that justify government programs and say that they can make the world a better place. Prior to the 1930s, most people thought that business cycles were not inherent in capitalism, that they were caused by institutions outside the capitalist system. Governments, government central banks, and our commercial fractional reserve banking system. That they created debts and money out of thin air, that money went into credit markets first, the banking system, which caused a reduction in interest rates, more loans to be made. Those extra loans were made for projects that appeared to be unprofitable before the money was created and interest rates were high. Now, because you printed more money up, nothing else has changed, but interest rates are lower. Suddenly, these projects appear to be profitable, and businessmen go out and borrow the money to start those projects. This causes errors to be made during the boom. Projects get started, people think they're going to be profitable, They think there are enough real resources saved in the economy to complete all of these projects, so they get started and that people are willing to wait for them. When either the new money stops being created and or people realize these extra projects started because of lower interest rates are in fact mistakes or errors, they're not going to be profitable. People haven't saved enough real resources to complete them all, and or people aren't willing to wait for the consumer goods that get produced later. That triggers the recession or the bust. The recession or the bust is a necessary consequence of the boom that started it, because we have to clear out or eliminate all of these mistakes that we made in the economy, these non-profitable projects that there aren't enough resources out there to complete. They're mistakes. When you realize you made a mistake, you liquidate the mistake. And businessmen do this. They release factors of production back onto markets, especially labor. That causes unemployment to go up, income to go down, and the economy and output decrease with it. Once those mistakes are cleared out of the economy, those unemployed resources can be reintegrated into the economy, producing wealth this time in completable projects rather than errors or mistakes. And that triggers the recovery. Now, mainstream economists say, no, we have these assumptions that business cycles are inherent, or that make business cycles inherent in capitalism. And in fact, the things that save us or smooth out these cycles or these excesses of capitalism are in fact governments, central banks, and the commercial banking system itself. And we can justify government interventions in the economy. This has been an hour. I'm finished. I hope you learned from this. The quiz will come up. I'm going to make it short, sweet, and simple. So enjoy the quiz. Thank you.